We're just starting to live stream on YouTube for posterity's sake. Grab a chair and join us.
Why do you put the laptop for us so we can see who's on the phone?
That camera is looking at us.
But we can't see them.
Well, then, do you want to do that?
Yeah.
What? This will not go away.
See ourselves.
Look at us.
All right. Hey everyone, welcome to DaVinci, either in person or online here, or possibly posterity if you're watching this later. This program is in review, in which we set aside time to have a in-depth discussion about the exhibitions that are here in DaVinci's galleries, and sometimes a resident as well. And so we are fortunate enough to be watching, to be sitting in I Look at the World, and then later on we will go upstairs to Gallery 2 to look at Bewilderment. As we finalize some of this tech stuff that Bill's helping us with, it looks like. What are you doing over there?
Trying to get the gallery view so we can see.
Well, we
Oh, it's
can do
because I'm
that.
spotlighting ourselves so that everyone else can see us. Hey.
Yeah. And if we take it off, then the YouTube will be all funky.
Yeah,
Right,
so
I've seen
the
that.
real secret, yeah. All right, so I want to invite everyone who's online to definitely use that chat or let us know, and we can make sure that we can hear you here in the gallery. And so if you want to type in questions or unmute yourself and chime in to the discussion here that's happening in the gallery, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I would say too, normally we have more people in person, so definitely unmute yourself and just feel free to speak, because we'll be able to hear you guys. Right, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, oh, and also let us know if you can't hear us very well. We'll try to project as much as possible so that everyone at home can hear us. But let us know if that's becoming an issue online, and we'll make sure to remedy that ASAP. So I guess we can jump into this exhibition. So to give a little context to what we're looking at here, we are in an exhibition that was curated by David Acosta, who is a wonderful curator, poet, and of course our fearless board president here at DaVinci Art Alliance, in which he has assembled two photographers here. And so we have Isaac Scott, who runs the west end of our gallery space here, with a series of photographs all depicting the George Floyd protest here in Philadelphia. And then on the east side of the gallery here, Gallery 1, we have Adatrio, who is depicting the various journeys and clashes with authorities from the series of quote-unquote caravans or a number of migrants moving up through Central America, Mexico, and then clashing at the US border. Both of these events were taking place in the summer of 2020, and so that is their kind of significant link because these are happening in two separated geographic locations, but temporally they're united, and of course the imagery that David has assembled for us certainly underscores the similarities of these two highly political issues, and that can be seen in the imagery of these two series of photographic works as well. So,
Also, just to throw it out there, we have a video walkthrough on our website. I think that would be great for like people at home if you haven't had a chance yet to see it in person, but definitely try to come see it because it's really good.
yes, absolutely. So we are in the twilight hours of this exhibition being up. The last day is Wednesday. So if you haven't made it down here in person and are really itching to, you have one final day besides today to come see it, because then starting next Thursday, we are in install mode, and we'll be coming up with two more exhibitions for you that we'll take a look at later. But let's keep the exhibition focused here and now. Bill, did you?
No, I just remembered something. I made a mistake.
Okay, all right. Also, hey, Krista, how's it going?
Hi.
Good to see you. Glad you made it.
Yeah, glad I figured out the in-person to online situation this time.
Yeah. All of the above is the correct
Yeah.
answer. Yeah. Excellent. So I wanted to have this conversation about this exhibition. It's a little bit different than some of the other ones we had in the past. And we've definitely tried a few different things in terms of the logistics and install. And so I'm eager to see what the assembled posse of us here think about some of these iterations, what's really working for you, how can we display some of these images and stories in a most effective way, and general feedback of the work itself, certainly as well. And so, yeah, I want to open it up. I did most of the install and curation with David, so I have access to a lot of the answers if there's questions floating around there. But yeah, I guess I think just first impressions of this exhibition is kind of what we're thinking for.
If I'll just jump in then, because I was in yesterday dropping off my piece. Can you hear me okay?
You can hear me great, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, the show looks awesome. And I just want to say I really appreciate that you're exhibiting artwork without frames. I think it's super duper important. They're professionally presented, they look clean and neat. There's a way to do it that kind of takes the pressure off the artist to frame pieces for an exhibit, which I think is a real burden. And then it becomes a whole question of material and money and storage. Anyway, framing is crazy, especially for a big exhibit like this. So I just really appreciate what you're trying to do. I think the magnets are working fabulous. For me, the wood, I wanted to see how it was done. The edges of the wood slats were slightly distracting to me, but that's pretty minimal. I think the first glance is like, it's professional, it's neat, it does what it has to do, takes the burden off the artist, and I think sets a really good example for, reducing materials, presenting things in an intelligent way. If a piece is sold, that's another thing. Let's get it framed. But beyond that, I think it's a terrible burden for artists to have to deal with framed artwork that doesn't sell.
Well, it's also like, the thing with frames too is that, like, what if you really like a frame and the buyer doesn't?
Exactly.
And then you might be thrown off from buying it.
Yeah, it's a real problem. So I'm really glad to see a gallery, a white box gallery here, taking a different approach and making the possibility of exhibiting professionally like a little easier for everyone. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for doing that.
I wanted to say too, because I think you talked about it a couple times, how there was like an idea thrown out there to keep the photos like a raw edge. And I think that would have worked well with the wood. Like, I think it's probably a little bit harder maybe to sell something with like a raw edge, but I think in terms of the actual exhibit, it would have looked really cool when you could like see the wood, and it would have given that like rustic vibe kind of that you pointed out, Andrea.
Yeah, I think at some
Oh,
point.
yeah, sure. No, but these images, warranted a clean look,
Yeah.
rustic about them, for me. So I think it was sort of a smart idea to try to hide that aspect of the installation. The magnets are the magnets. I think they look fine. So I think it's worth playing with, and also in discussions with artists to sort of throw that out there as an idea. Just because you're showing in the gallery doesn't mean your work has to be framed. Let's talk about thinking ahead, creating artwork that can be installed. I don't know. I mean, it might not ever come up again, but I think you did a great job with this.
I second that, Andrea, and I hate what glass does to works on paper. It so interferes with the imagery, and so the fact that you can see these photographs without glare and reflection, you can just dive into the imagery. I think it's really powerful.
Yeah.
And then having them printed on such heavy paper so there's no wrinkling, they have such a presence because of the weight of the paper kind of helps with the weight of the imagery. I think it's a wonderful present. Plus, I think the wood slats help create a kind of a shadow frame because it's pulled off the wall just by that fraction of an inch. It really makes you, it does everything that a frame would, and without all that expense.
Yeah.
I
And
think
of course, you know,
as a basic, it's great.
works on paper are at risk, but that's just a risk, you know, if you are hanging it in a permanent place to a permanent owner, then it should be carefully, you know,
For
protected.
the life of a 3-week show, you
3
know,
weeks.
of doing the framing and the glazing, and
That's right.
actually the last couple of things I've submitted to shows here that are in frames, I try to take the glass out because I feel like it's a safe environment, and
That's right.
I'd rather the visitor really see my work and not have the reflection getting in the way. Because I think it's hard enough for people to understand prints. So,
Yeah.
don't put another barrier.
Right.
I think too, just to piggyback on what you were saying, Bill, there's something very urgent about, especially given the really powerful and like heartbreaking subject matter. I'm not good at projecting my voice. I know if you're here, but I think if you had the glass over it,
Lost the sound. We can't hear.
Yeah, what happened?
There we go. Can't hear you.
Yeah, it just cut off. Just really.
It's going in and out now.
I don't hear a thing.
It goes in and out.
Huh.
Nope.
Yeah, that's strange. 'Cause
And now it's back.
not for me.
Yeah, it's out again. Nope.
Can you still hear me? Can anyone hear me in the room?
I can hear you.
Oh, Bill can hear me. I can't hear anything from the room. Huh.
Oh,
There you go.
somebody
Okay.
hit the mute button on the microphone.
Okay, that's good.
you guys really want to.
That's it.
Ready now.
The button.
So I'm gonna do this again?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Okay, so I was saying, to piggyback off what Bill was saying, and especially because this is one of the more powerful, maybe the most powerful experience I've had with an exhibition here. Like I was literally crying when I was viewing it, because these are both police brutality and mass migration and family separation are issues that are very near and dear to my heart. I feel that it's very appropriate to not have the glass over the pieces. I feel like it lends an urgency to issues we need to be urgently dealing with. And I think to have them behind glass would make them more art objects and cause them to take a step back when we need to be like taking a step forward. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you for
We
the
got
friend.
that.
Sorry, I apologize to everybody on Zoom. There's a mute button on the mic that got hit. In transit there. Our apologies.
One of the things, Ronnie and I were talking about too in like week 1 of the show is I don't know a lot about photo. And it's really interesting that both of these is digital, right?
Yeah.
So there's such a different quality to both of the sides of the room. Like Isaac's work is so like crisp, and Ada's work has this like depth to it and like focal points and like a softness within these like really just like horrible moments sometimes. And it's just like as someone who doesn't know a lot about photo, it was really compelling to me to be able to literally just like go back and forth like that and see like just all of these different aspects and very like some of the photos are very similar. Like the photos of the crowds on both sides of the room are very similar, but they're completely different.
Yeah, Ada has an almost like cinegraphic approach to photography, whereas Isaac is almost closer to photojournalism.
Yeah.
And just like those really subtle differences come out when you spend some time with the pieces.
But I think there's like, there's an intimacy in Autumn's work too, that really comes through, like, so like my understanding is that Autumn traveled with the caravan. And like, I think that comes out in her work, is that she has a relationship with these people, and like, there's a softness. I would assume if you're traveling with people for a couple months, like there's a softness within you towards the people, and I feel like that's reflective in the work, whereas like Isaac's work, I'm sure he knew people there too, but it's like I've been to a lot of experiences like this, and it's just quick, you know, and the photos feel quick of him just kind of like running past and shooting a photo.
Kind of,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I think in addition to their different photographic sensibilities, the kinds of events lend themselves to different ways
Yeah.
of creating imagery. So if you're with a group for a long period of time, there's much more intimate moments that you have access to.
Yeah.
In an event like the street protest, that's, as you say, it's happening fast. You don't know you just, whatever you capture is what you happen to see where you are, where the other one is a much longer process. But also that lends to kind of the messages that you get from the two sets of photos is that one is still happening.
Yeah.
And this is not happening. Hopefully there's political will has come out of this and we can keep changing our society, but this is happening every day.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like going off of what you said, Isaac was so good at capturing the crowd, and like you can see each individual's face. And then Ada, it was like the individual, and I think they both really thrived in those like two planes, and it's really cool to see like that next to each other, and kind of like you said, being able to bounce back and forth and be like, oh, this is the crowd, but they're like a group who's angry, and then you move over and you're like this heartbreakingly sad individual. It's like, it's really cool kind of to, I don't know. Yeah, it works so well together.
And I'm curious to what the collective here has any input on the two excerpts from the Langston Hughes poem that David wanted to connect to the gallery here. So for context, there are two sections of this poem, I Look at the World, in the gallery space with vinyl on the wall. So just under our kind of lead image here, as you walk into the gallery of the police car on fire outside of McDonald's, it says, I look, excuse me, tickle in my throat, apologies. I look then at the silly walls through dark eyes and a dark face, and this is what I know. That all these walls, oppression builds, will have to go. And then opposite of that, we have, I look at the world from awakening eyes and a black face, and this is what I see, this fenced off narrow space assigned to me. And these two sections of the poem, both artists and David felt passionate about including in this physical space itself as a direct link to the title of the exhibition and even the specific images that they are under here. And so that's something that's a little bit new that David wanted to try out for the show. So I'm curious, how is that working for you?
I think it unites the two stories, you know, as a collective liberation. That it's like showing these like two like disparate things that are both happening in the same moment, and how it's every struggle is the same struggle until like we're all free.
And even when this poem was written, which was not contemporary.
Right, it puts it in a historical context.
Yeah.
The Langston Hughes was part of the Harlem Renaissance, and was talking the kind of the first flowering of African American expression in urban 20th century America, and the thought that those struggles is this struggle, and even though this was a one-time event, or an event with a beginning and an ending, the fundamental issue that it's about is still ongoing.
What I think is interesting too is that like when you originally said it was a one-time event, but I was like, I don't know if you saw my face, but I was like, what are you talking about? Because like, I think for,
This isn't happening on the streets of Philadelphia right now.
no, but
This
it's
is
a
happening
part of
on
a
our
narrative
border.
that has like
Absolutely.
continued.
The reason
You know,
it's
so-
happening is still around us. And
Yeah.
hasn't been fixed, yes.
Yeah, and like when you're a part of circles that are continually going to that, like, you start naming it after the day. Or like, there's benchmarks. It's not like, oh, when we did that, you know, like it's a continuous thing that then like blends together because it is continuous. And then, you know, they add $5 million more to the police budget, or $30 million to the police budget 2 years later, it's fine.
What's being protested in that protest, though, is happening right now. So it's a subtle difference. It's not as distinct as it appears on the surface. We're not necessarily, in the streets protesting police brutality, but it's going on. It didn't end in 2020.
I think to come back to an earlier point about like the wood that was kind of in there. This was a kind of an idea that I had and not done quite in this way before. And so, Andrea, I appreciate your comments about it. I think if I needed to do it over again, I might consider painting that wood all white or black or something, recognizing the amount that would be seen, or kind of maybe change the dimensions of them slightly, or maybe in a different scenario, the wood grain would be in some way related to the context of the image. I think it's not that here. Yeah, definitely a learning experience. Ultimately, the magnets work pretty well, considering the weight of the paper. And so if you are thinking about replicating this scenario, very heavyweight paper is the key.
Yes, yeah.
Well, and this one required magnets in the middle. The large one on this wall is bigger than the others. And
Yeah.
It's got an intermittent magnet in the middle on each side. So
Yeah.
is there another strip all the way across? or-
No,
Just
those
a
are vertical slats there on the side. But yeah, as you scale up, the more support is required. As the weight at a certain point ends up kind of working against you. So you need more points of contact to support.
Well, the other photographic show that I thought was spectacular was Ella's, where she mounted them on the aluminum panels, which had that
Yeah.
same advantage of no glass and a sense of presence, but at tremendous cost.
Well, it actually not so tremendous.
Not so tremendous.
Actually, both of the two things those shows have in common is that everything from both of those shows was printed by Jeffrey Stockbridge, which he did the mount. He suggested and did the mounting for Ellen, and as reported by her, was far more affordable than framing. Obviously, a higher price point than just the paper itself, which we have now. So that middle ground is clearly a good option as well for those thinking about printing in a non-frame and glass context. But yeah, this was a scenario that was born out of a small budget, as all things are. And so yeah, we were trying some new things out and hoping to present this lower budget model in the cleanest, most direct, immediate way that felt appropriate for everyone's wallets, because we did the printing for this show specifically. So these were not printed prior to this exhibition.
Right.
And the original plan was for it to be framed.
Yeah.
But once they got the cost estimate, it was just so high. And I think you know, like, I think sometimes, like, you fall into things that are better. You know, like, the original idea was to go the traditional route, because that's
Well-
how Isaac's work and Otto's work have been
Right.
seen in the past, was in the traditional framing way. But like, I think that this carries through
Well, I
much
think
better, and it starts.
that echoes Andrea's point of, you don't always have to do it the way it's always been done.
Yeah,
And sometimes you fall into better solutions.
yeah, and I think like it brings it, like that was the idea, like Ronnie mentioned about it being printed on like deckled paper rather than it being on like crisp edges, was like bringing in more of like an installation idea. That like once we got rid of the frames, it was like, okay, what if it looked like it was like ripped out of newspapers? And it was like this
Mm.
documentation of an event. And like that eventually that idea went away after like different conversations, and this is what we have, but like I'm interested in a show in the future doing that, because I think that'd be really fun.
Good.
Yeah, how are we doing on time?
I have about like 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Is there anything super pressing anyone wants to say?
Back to the wood just one more time. I know people were saying it's like kind of. In terms of the wood being like somewhat distracting, maybe doing like flush to the wall, and just like screwing in and using the screw in the wall for the magnet, so then there's nothing. But I recognize that also takes away like the shadow box feel of it. But I don't know, maybe that is also an option.
My old boss does aluminum bars, because you can just drill straight into aluminum bars. So it would have to be like a cleaner thing that would match the magnet without it taking anything away.
And the aluminum would be metal like a magnet, so it would minimizing the number of elements you're looking at. I
Yeah,
also think painting it black could work. You could also experiment with how far back from the edge does it need to be, but can you still support the corner? Different ways.
Wait, is aluminum magnetic or receptive to?
No,
maybe
yeah.
I'm thinking steel bar, I don't know. I know it's magnetic.
Oh, and then he must be doing steel bar.
Yeah,
You'd have to embed an iron head in the, could get really tricky.
Yeah, then like obviously the benefit of metal to wood there is obviously I can take metal or I take wood downstairs.
Yes.
Very quickly alter the shape and length of that. Metal sometimes is a little bit more, takes a little bit more planning, or if you have the right tools. But yeah, obviously the benefits of that, of having metal will be definitely, for painting, the cleaner material of the aluminum or metal might just kind of make more sense.
and that would work if you knew what size beforehand, like you
Yeah.
didn't know. So we were told one size, and Brian cut all the wood down to that size. And then we got everything, and that wood didn't work anymore.
Yeah,
So
that's a different
that's
size,
why
surprise.
there's like a separation between the two planks, was that it used to be one plank.
Can I have one idea that you might not have considered too, is I do like the shadow effect of these rails, but a shadow box effect, if the support is rigid enough, can be achieved through putting magnets on the back and on the front, like use the magnets as a spacer away from, say, the screw head.
Yeah, that would definitely work. It would require more magnets.
Yes.
But yeah,
It would require
definitely.
more magnets, and you wouldn't have the support that, pushing against the little rail gives you. But anyway, it's really, that's what artists are good at, right? Solving these kinds of practical problems. Sometimes it takes a little foresight with an intention in mind of, oh, how am I going to exhibit this work? Which I think artists kind of need to have that in mind anyway. Especially if it's their responsibility to get it up on the wall in a way that's, sustainable for their practice. So yeah, experiment.
Yeah, that method would work really well on, I remember, I think I hung your piece like that a long time ago when you had like a transparent paper in that like glacier print.
Yes, yes.
Because we wouldn't want to show a backing substrate, but we wanted to be as less visible as possible, knowing that the paper was see-through. So yes, that's a great example of when that's a really good option, and when the print is smaller than this, because this one definitely needed the support of more substantial backing.
Because you hung my prints that were half sheet, so they're smaller than this. They were half of the, so they were 15 by 20 roughly. And they didn't need the wood backing.
Yeah. Good stuff. I think that's kind of about the distribution of time. So bear with us, online folks. We are going to unplug, move upstairs, and be back with you in just a minute as we traverse up to the top of our building now. All right, stay tuned.
Hello again.
Can everyone hear us?
All right.
Hey.
Good. Excellent. Getting one more chair. But otherwise, welcome back. So we are in exhibition up in Gallery 2 called Bewilderment. Of course, that the spelling on that one is capitalizing the wild.
Be Wilderman.
The wild.
That's what I've been saying.
So
I bring the fan up here, would that be?
Oh, we have a fan here. Okay.
So this exhibition is a three-person exhibition made up of Sarah Bloom, who makes up the kind of photography end of the work here, Phyllis Anderson, who is our painter here, and then Sadie Francis, who is doing a lot of cyanotype and work on fabric and some collage over here, filling out the room, as well as there are some kind of plant shadow boxes directly behind the camera in the bay window area, and some cyanotype prints. So this exhibition comes to us out of an obvious connection between the three artists that are working here, all directly dealing with aspects of nature in their own work in a variety of different ways. What's up, Sam? Oh, wait.
Can you put it somewhere?
It was there a minute ago.
I do with my life?
I think you just walked away with it.
Sorry, everyone. Yep.
Alright, mystery solved.
My mom.
Yeah, so obviously the linkage between these three artists is the usage of natural elements and a contemplation with nature as it relates to all three of them in very different ways, in very different medium. And so we have a kind of a lot of things happening here in the gallery right now, in which we'll give you a little tour here in a minute, as there's a very large kind of drapery cyanotype piece that's just over where our camera is now, that is spanning the two flanks of the bay window, as well as some language text elements that are also incorporated into here using dried moss, which is kind of a fun element supporting the exhibition here and tying into Sarah Bloom's imagery and materiality in this piece over here as well. So yeah, well, one, I just want to note that this is Phyllis Anderson's perhaps last exhibition with us for quite a while, because she's moving off to Colorado. So we're sad to see her go. So we're giving her a fond farewell here, with a lot of very kind of electric paintings here depicting the mountainous landscape to which she's moving. But yeah, so I guess we can open this up to initial reactions. How are the three of these artists coming together? Is a certain thing working for you? There's a lot of elements in here that are playing off of each other that I'm curious to hear about. So,
I'm also curious, Andrea's perspective, because she was originally Sadie.
Right,
The original proposal had Andrea.
right. Yeah, no, and I was in there yesterday chatting with Brian a little bit about the installation up there, and when I was making my comments, I had kind of forgotten to even consider or even remember the fact that Phyllis had approached me with being part of this exhibit about something loosely based about nature. And it just didn't feel like the right time for me to commit to that. But stepping into the room, I was so really pleasantly surprised at the outcome and how well the three kind of disparate approaches to the theme really come together in a really interesting way that sort of highlights different things about the different artists' work. And now reflecting on like, well, what if I had been hanging in that show? I just don't think it would have worked at all. Like, I don't know. This is just so the three of them are really, really coming together nicely. So yeah, I like this sort of this overt, and they're all very overtly about nature and also the human presence in Sarah's work. Whereas my ideas about nature are just so much more abstractly thought out that I think it would have been a little bit of a stretch. So like, yeah. And I don't think the coal and highlighting the theme of coal in this context, I don't know, it would have really thinned out, I think, this sort of broader comment about nature and wilderness that they're making. So yeah, I think it came together really beautifully.
It's interesting that you talk about like the human interaction with nature too, that's present in the pieces, Andrew, because I never thought of it until you just said it. And now I'm like looking around and I'm like, damn. Cause like anyone from the staff will know that I've been saying this to everyone. Like I really imagine Phyllis physically making these paintings when I go.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like Phyllis.
Yes.
Painting. And then like obviously Sarah's within her pieces, but then also Sadie's pieces are so manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
Like they could have just been like most people do the Sienna type of like you just lay down a step and you develop it, but like she really goes into it and has this like hand.
Yes.
Like there's no way that would have just happened otherwise,
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point, because that is the human. So in Phyllis, through her outscale kind of vision and mark making, and then the cyanotypes with this layer of sort of handwork and intervention on top of the natural process the photographic process that's happening underneath it. Yeah, the human is in there in all of them. Very nicely done.
I thought it's cool too how they all like physically used nature as well. Like Phyllis has to probably like interact with nature to get like a vision of what she wants to paint. And then Sarah literally uses plants in her photography. And then Sadie obviously has to use plants and the sun to make her cyanotypes. And I think that kind of aspect really like gives a through line through all three artists as well. So like, I don't know, they have so many connections, even though it's such different work.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the materiality of Sarah's prints too.
Yeah.
That this is the first time I don't know if it's the first time, but it's the first time she's displayed her photos on wood before, like directly printed onto the wood. And I know she was talking to me at the opening about how excited she was to have done it and was like asking if it worked. And I was like, I think it brings such like another layer of depth to the images. And like, it just like I would have thought that the original photo has the wood grain in it because of how well it works.
Really interesting.
Yeah, after like talking with a lot of folks over this month, if they were photographers, they were really excited about those works specifically. And almost everyone talked to me about them. And so that I always I saw Sarah the other day, and so I reported that, and she was very excited about how that was well received.
Well, like the presentation downstairs, by not having frames and no glazing, it really gives you a very direct experience with the photograph. And then to have it on an organic material when it's talking about nature, that just
Yeah.
it's another great bonus. They're really beautifully done. And then her technique of having the photograph and then this veil of transparent white and then a leaf form. It's just they're great.
Yeah, really complex. Did she talk about how that was actually done? Getting that photo emulsion like directly on the wood? How does that even work?
I know she didn't do it herself.
Yeah,
She had
she
another
printed it.
printer.
She got a printer.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I know I saw a YouTube of her working
Oh,
maybe a couple of years ago where there's like this decoupage process where you coat
interesting.
something with matte medium and you embed the photo and then you will rub the paper off. So I don't know if she did it that
No,
way.
because
These are emulsion
these are
on.
different.
on the
So
wood.
those ones is like a layer of inkjet. So even
Yeah.
after you roll it off, you still see like the texture.
Yeah.
But these are like, I have no idea, like it feels more like toner based or something, but it's like, it just looks embedded into
Yeah.
it instead of laying on
Mhm.
top.
Right.
But even that piece behind you too is the only one that isn't on wood. And like, that feels really reminiscent to like Sadie's work that you guys at home can't see, but like she embroidered back into like the
Yeah.
Xanthite, with like the images of, like the Queensland lace that she was printing. Sarah did something similar on this piece behind Bill and Ronnie, that she also embroidered like some of the flowers that were printed in the overlay, she embroidered back into them and then brought in like plants and stuff into it.
Well, she also sewed the photo onto the canvas.
Yeah.
So again, no glass.
Oh,
It's really presenting the photo like the painting. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, when you look at a painting, you're just looking at the dried oil or acrylic right on a fabric surface. So,
Yeah,
so playing with the surfaces and then all of, I don't know, that's a really, I just love it. It's this great thread. They're all, the way the art is sitting on whatever surface we're looking at is integral to the way they put it together. And they all hang together, so it's.
Yeah, I really appreciated this, this specific piece, the handling of the sewing the piece onto a canvas. It functionally does all the things, or formally does all the things that like matted framed
Yeah.
image is kind of expected to do, but it does it in such a clever way that is both functional and ties itself to the medium it's already using, and it's definitely a clever move that I would love to see repeated. certainly by Sarah and maybe by others, yeah.
Well, both Cyanotype and this photograph and all of the photographs are taking this technical process of photography that typically you do in a dark room, it's chemicals, but then putting it into a craft context of like the embroidery on top, or even this, the rondo over here where it's collage. I mean, just such an interesting way to bring photography into this other realm of making an object, using photography.
Yeah, and Sadie is doing a similar thing, which I really love how she decided to do that hand stitching around the like border of those pieces so that it's functioning like a frame, like some sort of
Giving you an edge.
formal device to activate that edge in a way that like painting often considers or frames often consider, but uses the medium they're already using in such a clever way is a really wonderful detail.
It was funny too at the opening. I was talking to Phyllis and she was like, at first kind of like, I don't know if this is gonna work, the exhibit, and she was like, nature, like that's what's gonna bring us together, it's just nature, and she was cracking me up, but I was like, the way they framed it, it works so well, and like they all kind of were coming to like this common ground through 3 separate techniques. And it's kind of interesting now that we're talking about it, how Sadie, and you just said like Andrea was supposed to be Sadie. I kind of think like they almost needed Sadie, which is interesting because they needed like someone who could pull in photo and like this element of like craft to bring it all together. I think it almost would have like failed without her work as well. Like it's because it would have been too different. You know?
I wouldn't go so far as fail.
Well, maybe not fail, but
Because I would love to see Andrew's work in this context. It would just add another dimension.
Right, it would have been a
But
totally
Andrew's work is so much about place, and Phyllis's paintings are about place. I don't think she could have done these things if she didn't spend as much time as she does in the Rockies.
Yeah.
And I've heard her talk about this. These are like favorite mountains. It's like her Cezanne in Mont Saint Victoire. I mean, there are certain peaks that she paints over and over. And I think that the element of place in Andrew's work would have been an interesting foil to that. So it would have been a different show.
Yeah.
And Sarah missed her place.
yeah.
Now, I would have really loved to see this show under a different circumstance, but I would be curious to see, instead of Phyllis, if Andrea was here and remove the element of electric color that's happening in paint, which would have been an outlier. If Andrea had replaced Sadie, really toning down that color, tying it to, so now you've got moss and you've got anthracite and the embroidery, and that's a different conversation that could be exciting as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's the alchemy of curation, right? And
Yeah.
Well, and the artists interacting.
yes, it's actually right. It is like a chemical reaction.
Have amazing great people. We can do anything. Also, it's an installation point. I want to, people at home can't see it, but the fabric that's hanging in the bay window is hung from a wire with turnbuckles that I think Brian first used with Marcy Sisters velvet sticks. Sometimes it's another use for that.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise in that Sadie showed up with this kind of like long stick that was supposed to branch, no pun intended, the divide here, and realized we were several feet short of
Oh, she
that.
thought it would actually hang on.
Yeah, so I came up with this hopefully kind of discreet way of getting that up there still.
No. Well, it's not the first thing you notice about these.
Great, good to hear.
And if you like this, you'll love the next show.
Okay.
I think it kind of looks cool with like the branch almost like floating.
Yeah. But again, she's sewn that fabric onto that, so again, the hand making, taking a piece of nature and making it the rod that the thing hangs on, it's really.
Yeah.
And then there's actually stitching, mainly at the tops of the samurai panels, which are kind of like a skyscraper cityscape. You know how they came up with the title, The Wilderman?
I don't, I think it was just something that they collectively decided. Do you have any other context of that?
I emailed them before I made the summer newsletter and I said, do you have a title yet? And they were like, let's get back to you, and then the next day I would have the title. That's the only context I have.
Sometimes we just need a prod.
Yeah.
From my understanding, it was kind of like them trying to make sense of like nature. So it's like the way that they wrote their exhibition statement was that like they're kind of looking, like as a society have become so separate from nature, and they're on the outside looking in, bewildered, and kind of like tying in the wildness of the show. They wanted to like capitalize on the wild part. So it was kind of like them coming to terms with nature and how they experience it and like their connection to it.
Well, Phyllis's palette is pretty wild. I don't think skies and color are normally orange. No.
Yeah, that had surprised me because that had not historically been an element of her color palette. But this very high key color palette adds a lot of drama, and a lot of that, those cadmiums are, don't immediately register as kind of a natural palette, which is interesting that she chose them to depict this subject. But for better or worse, it really turns up the kind of volume on these images when you have so many complementary colors and the contrasting line work that's added in to accentuate the forms and these kind of flourishes. It is really interesting, and definitely does kind of remind me of Cézanne as well, where
And Matisse.
we're
We're reading the biography in book club, like maybe the only person who has a book.
I think you are.
And I just finished it for the second time, it's even better. His working through and moving from his Northern European brown palette to the fauve explosion, him discovering himself as an artist. And what's so interesting looking at Phyllis's work is, although the sky of orange sky, when you shift the palette that way, she's still keeping the contrasts and the value scale that you can read it. It doesn't look like you're looking at a negative of the color photograph. She's still keeping a value scale that is recognizable with just those incredible colors. Makes you see nature in a different way. And the reason he moved to those colors was that was part of his personal expression. So he's telling you something about his state of mind by using those colors. So we're getting a glimpse into how Phyllis experiences the mountains.
Yeah, and
She's super jazzed to go.
I know.
That's what we're seeing. It's
I
like,
know.
I can't wait, let me out of here.
I mean, from a technical standpoint, being able to divorce hue from value in an image, incredibly difficult to do. And so definitely props to that.
Pulls it off.
Yeah.
She definitely like captured the drama of like light in nature.
Yeah,
Like the electric yellow, like on the deer. I just love that. It's just, because sometimes you see that in nature and you're like, is that, like, what am I looking at a painting? And
Right.
she really kind of went for it.
Well, and the standing trees.
Well, even that specifically, what's so interesting is that the locality of color in smaller contexts completely makes sense. Whereas the macro color is alien, totally out of left field. But the only way it works is in specific interactions between one shifting color to another. Is the value makes sense, the hues are wild, but everything else is within reason. And again, so difficult to do. I'm very impressed.
But then seeing the actual moss texture and Sarah's next to it.
Oh, that reminds me, there's a soundtrack that goes in this show that we don't have playing because we didn't want to disturb the audio for people at home. But I'm gonna put it on really quick so that we can all experience this and exist in the Rainforest Cafe together.
Yeah, there's like one section of this where I'm just like, am I in a pet store? What's happening right now?
Like a chainsaw? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, so Sarah said that her daughter made the audio, which I love. Can you hear that okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
Got a lot of birds right now.
Yeah, so it's 15 minutes long. So, which like, it's interesting, because sometimes, like Brian said, like there's just like random stuff that it sounds like you're in a bird or a pet store, or like there's a chainsaw, or like all this like random stuff. That like sometimes, especially like if I forget to turn it off and then everyone else is gone and we're closed, but it's like really low, I'm like, I'm going insane. It finally happened. Let me fast forward a little bit.
Yeah, I've definitely like heard that chainsaw and looked out the window to see who was cutting down a tree and then realized that I'm stupid.
Yeah.
A tree in that parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened before.
It's levitating another log.
Yesterday, I walked outside. For anyone who has not been to the gallery recently, they have a floating log outside that's been there for a couple of months because a tree was chopped down.
Oh, yeah.
Grew around a table. And it is completely safe. But yesterday, I was unlocking my bike to go somewhere, and this couple was walking past it. She was like, "This is unsafe. Someone's going to die." And I was like, "It's been there for 5 months. It's okay."
I love that floating log. That's the coolest thing.
Yeah, we have a sticker for sale of the floating log. So if anyone wants a memoriam for the log, please come to us.
My son is fascinated by that thing. I think it is sticker, you saw that.
Well, it catches the light in different ways at different times of day.
Awesome.
Interesting.
Get rid of our clocks and just know the time
Yeah,
Where the
so
light is on the log.
the next write-in candidate come November, floating log for Congress. Okay.
Okay, so I think we're wrapping up. But I wanted to do a commercial break for Brian. So if you enjoy this program, we are gonna start selling passes that are more intensive versions of our events. So one of the classes that we have for enrollment right now is Exhibition Boot Camp, where for 2 intensive weekends we get to work with Brian and like eventually the rest of the staff in order to examine your own work critically and examine the work of your peers critically, and collectively as a group curate your own exhibition that will be on view in the 3rd floor gallery space the entire month of September. And the opening will correspond with whatever opening that is just in September. I can't think of right now. Alessandra and Mike.
Yeah.
So our fellowship artist, Mike, whose last name I can never pronounce, will be downstairs. Alessandra will be up here. And then your show, if you enroll, will be up on the third floor. And we're super excited to do it. This is our second time doing it. And it's been many years since the last time we did it. So
Yeah.
we're like completely reanalyzing it. We learned a lot from running this program this year, and we're very excited.
Yeah.
So please sign up.
Yeah, sign up. A lot goes into curation that I think is incredibly valuable for all artists to know. To think about your work in the context of being around other work, whether that's your own or someone else's. Those types of considerations are something that I've realized a lot of people are maybe not thinking about, and I think could benefit heavily by integrating them into your own studio practice. And so we go through a lot of that, and I divulge a lot of the state secrets about what I'm thinking about when I'm curating a show, especially a big group show, which are especially challenging. And so yeah, it is a lot of fun. And Bill, you were in
I
our
can give a
consideration.
testimonial.
Testimonial.
Yeah, it's an amazing experience. If you like Crit Night and like having people look seriously at your work and give you feedback, you will love the experience of boot camp, because the first piece of it is looking intensely at each other's work. And that was just a wonderful experience. And then once you know each other and understand each other's work, to then be able to put it on the wall in a way that makes a coherent statement, which is a wonderful, fabulous experience.
How many artists are you trying to get together for each session or for this current one that you're talking about?
Yeah, great question. We're gonna do 6 so that we make sure that it's like a small, tight group and that there's plenty of wall space for everyone to be represented in the space for the final exhibition. And so we'll, the 6 of us, or I guess 7 of us, will be able to really get to know each other's work really well
I
at
think
this
we
kind of
had-
small group.
We had 8 people and the show was in this gallery.
Yeah.
And I think everybody had at least 2 pieces in the show, I feel like.
Yeah,
And also the part of the process is you get to see your work through others' eyes, and then you have this great conversation about which pieces talk to each other. And then the photo that's advertising it is what really happened. Of somebody like holding a piece on the wall to get it, so everybody else can get a sense of does it speak or not.
yeah,
It's a great experience. Well worth the money, and ours was crammed into one weekend, so the thought of spreading it out gives you time to process in between, and even more time to talk.
yeah.
Well, we were thinking too, with the week in between, whatever feedback artists get from the first weekend about their work and like changing up ways of displaying it, they'll have a whole week in between to come back refreshed with like new ideas and new things.
Yeah.
New work, new display.
Cool. Yeah, so if you have any questions about that, shoot either of us an email. But yeah, thanks for coming to interview as
I
well.
have another question.
Except that Sam has one more thing.
I have one more thing, which is, or I guess a couple, we have a lot of open calls right now. If you were interested in the Next Fab residency last year, our last year's resident had to be a Next Fab member. We opened it up to anyone this year, so if you've ever been interested in, using Next Fab's resources, you'll get a free 6-month membership through this residency, and then that will eventually, you'll have a show in Gallery 2 next April during the Futures Fest, if you are selected as a resident. So please think about applying. The deadline is the 31st of August. Member submissions for next year's shows are still open for another like week and a half. Full disclosure, we don't have that many applicants so far, so it's free to have a show next year. Please apply.
Yeah.
We want to see your work.
Yeah.
And then I don't think it's open yet, right, for next.
It opens today.
Oh, okay.
Is it the 15th today or is it the 14th?
14th.
It opens tomorrow.
Tomorrow, we'll be opening submissions for our winter member show, which will be hosted in Gallery 2 called Bill's Exhibition with many other people. Will be downstairs, Joyous Disruption. So that show is our only everybody show this year. So any work that you submit will be accepted. We're actually allowing people to have up to 3 pieces in the show. And you may be asking yourselves, how will that fit in the space that we're currently in? Because we have very small size limitations this year because we thought that would be fun. So check it out and please submit work to us so we can see all of your work. Please submit to the flat file. Please look at our opportunities list. Liv just made an opportunity list for everyone. So local opportunities, we get them forwarded to us all the time and they take up a lot of space on the newsletter. So we thought it'd be better to just have them on the website. So start looking at that. I don't think there's anything on it right now, but we're loading stuff onto it as they come in. I think these are all my commercials.
All right.
Question, how's that fundraising going?
We have enough to stay open another 2 weeks. So
So buy the exhibition boot camp.
yeah. Fire classes and toll fronts.
Yeah, and if you know anyone who would benefit from that, who wants to learn more about wants to learn more about how to curate their own show, definitely share the opportunity too, because for that one, it doesn't have to just be members.
Uh-huh.
All right, I think we made it through everything. So great to see everyone. Wonderful program. Hands in on 3. Go team. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.